I never thought a routine dental appointment would open the darkest chapter of my life. But when Dr. Melissa Grant looked at my wife's x-rays that Tuesday morning, her expression shifted from professional calm to something I can only describe as controlled alarm. She excused herself, returned with the clinic manager, and 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a private office being asked questions I never imagined I would have to answer about the woman I had shared my life with for 7 years. My name is Daniel Brooks. I am 63 years old, recently retired from a career in civil engineering, and until that morning in October, I believed I knew everything about my wife, Laura. We had met at a community fundraiser in Vancouver 8 years ago. I had been a widower for 3 years by then, still trying to live with the empty spaces my first wife, Helen's death, had left in my home and heart. Helen and I had built 32 years together before pancreatic cancer took her. Those 3 years alone had already felt unbearably long. When friends began suggesting I consider dating again, I resisted. How do you replace 3 decades of shared history, of knowing someone so completely you could finish each other's sentences? Then I met Laura Bennett at that fundraiser. She was 51, elegant in a way that never felt forced, with auburn hair just beginning to show refined streaks of silver. She told me she was a financial consultant who had recently moved from Toronto after her own divorce. We talked for 2 hours that night about everything from urban planning to the best hiking trails in British Columbia. She had a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When she laughed at my terrible jokes about load-bearing walls, I felt something I had not felt in years: possibility. Our courtship was what most people would call a whirlwind, though at our age it felt more like two people who knew exactly what they wanted and saw no reason to waste time. We were engaged within 6 months and married a year after we first met. My daughter Emily, who was 34 at the time, had her doubts. She flew in from Calgary for a weekend specifically to meet Laura. "Dad, don't you think this is moving a bit fast?" she asked over coffee while Laura was out running errands. "Sweetheart, I'm 60. Fast is a luxury I can't ignore," I replied. "Your mother would want me to be happy." Emily observed Laura carefully during that visit, asking polite but thoughtful questions about her background, her career, and her previous marriage. Laura handled it gracefully, answering with just the right balance of openness and respect for Emily's protective instincts. "She seems nice, Dad," Emily said before flying back to Calgary. "Just be careful, okay? 7 years isn't that long to be alone after 32 years with Mom." I brushed off her concerns as natural daughterly worry. Looking back now, I wish I had paid closer attention to the quiet unease in her voice. The first year of marriage with Laura was genuinely pleasant. She moved into the house in West Vancouver that Helen and I had bought 30 years earlier. I had worried it might feel strange for her to live in another woman's space, but Laura insisted she wanted to respect my history with Helen. She suggested we redecorate together, keeping some of Helen's touches while gradually making the space our own. It felt like a thoughtful balance. Laura's work as a financial consultant meant irregular hours, sometimes evening meetings with clients and occasional weekend seminars. I did not mind. I had spent decades in a demanding career myself and understood professional obligations. When she came home late, we would share a nightcap on the deck overlooking the water, and she would tell me about her day. About 18 months into our marriage, I began having trouble sleeping. At first it was subtle, waking up at 3 in the morning, unable to fall back asleep, feeling vaguely restless. Then the digestive issues started. My stomach would cramp after meals, and I would feel nauseated for no clear reason. I blamed it on aging or stress over a few investments that were not performing well. "You should see a doctor," Laura would say, her brow creased with concern as she handed me peppermint tea. I did see my doctor. Dr. Stephen Parker had been my physician for 20 years. He ran blood tests, checked my vitals, and asked about my diet and stress levels. Everything came back normal. "Sometimes these things happen as we get older, Daniel," he told me. "Try to reduce stress, exercise more, and maybe cut back on coffee." I followed his advice. The symptoms would ease for a while and then quietly return. Laura began making me special morning smoothies filled with vitamins and supplements she ordered from a wellness company she had discovered. "These helped a client of mine who had similar issues," she explained. "They tasted awful, chalky and bitter despite the fruit she blended in, but I drank them faithfully. Laura was trying to help. At least that was what I believed." The sleep problems worsened. Some nights I would wake with my heart pounding, drenched in sweat. Other nights I had vivid, unsettling dreams I could barely remember once I woke. I also noticed moments of confusion, like forgetting why I had entered a room or losing my train of thought mid-sentence. Maybe it's early dementia, Laura suggested gently one evening. Your mother had Alzheimer's, didn't she? She was right. My mother had been diagnosed at 72, and the thought terrified me. Was I heading down the same path at 62? Emily called every Sunday. During one call about 2 years into my marriage to Laura, I mentioned the memory issues. Dad, that doesn't sound like you, she said, her voice tight with concern. Are you sure the doctor checked everything? Dr. Parker ran a full workup, I replied. Sometimes getting older just comes with these things. You're 62, not 92, she insisted. Have you gotten a second opinion? I had not. Laura had been so attentive, so supportive. She started accompanying me to medical appointments, keeping detailed notes about my symptoms and asking questions I would never have thought to ask. It felt wrong to doubt her judgment or seek additional opinions when she was working so hard to help me. The dental appointment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Laura had been complaining about tooth sensitivity for a few weeks, so I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Melissa Grant, a dentist whose practice was located in a modern building downtown. I went along because Laura had asked me to. I get anxious at the dentist, she admitted. Would you mind waiting with me? Of course, I agreed. That is what partners do. The appointment began routinely enough. Dr. Grant appeared to be in her early 40s, professionally warm, with dark hair tied back in a neat bun. She examined Laura's teeth, asked where the sensitivity was occurring, and then ordered a full set of x-rays. I remained in the waiting room, scrolling through news on my phone. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Eventually, the dental assistant stepped out and asked if I could come to the back to speak with Dr. Grant. Something in her expression made my chest tighten. Dr. Grant met me in the hallway just outside the x-ray room. Laura was not with her. Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you a few questions about your wife's medical history, she said quietly. Is something wrong with her teeth? I asked. Has Laura experienced any significant injuries in the past few years? Falls, accidents, anything that might have caused trauma to the bones? The question felt completely out of nowhere. Not that I'm aware of. Why? Dr. Grant gestured toward her office. Could we speak privately for a moment? As we walked, my mind raced through possibilities. Bone cancer, osteoporosis, something serious. She led me into her office, closed the door, and brought up several images on her computer screen. These are your wife's dental x-rays, she explained. But when we take jaw x-rays, we also capture parts of the surrounding skull structure. She leaned slightly forward and pointed at the display. Mr. Brooks, I need you to look at this. To my untrained eye, they looked like faint shadows and irregular variations in bone density. These are healed fractures, Dr. Grant said. This one in the jaw is relatively recent, maybe 6 to 8 months old. But these others, here in the cheekbone, in the orbital socket, and this one near the base of the skull, these are older and at different stages of healing, which suggests separate incidents. My mouth went dry. Fractures. Laura had never mentioned breaking any bones. She would have told me. Dr. Grant's expression remained carefully neutral. Mr. Brooks, the pattern I'm seeing raises serious concerns. Multiple facial and skull fractures at different stages of healing can sometimes indicate ongoing physical abuse. By law, I'm required to consider that possibility. Abuse? The word came out louder than I intended. No, you're misunderstanding. Our marriage is fine. Laura has never said anything like that. Could these injuries be from before we met? She paused briefly. The jaw fracture appears recent, within the past year. Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you directly. Have you ever struck your wife? The question felt like a physical blow. No, never. I would never do that. My hands began to tremble. There has to be some mistake. I don't believe there's an error in what the x-rays show, Dr. Grant replied gently but firmly. Given the pattern and the timeline, I am obligated to document this, but I wanted to speak with you first. Sometimes there are explanations. Can I see my wife? I asked. She's with our clinic manager right now, she said. But I need to ask, has your wife had any other injuries that you're aware of? Any emergency room visits? I tried to think through the fog of shock. She sprained her wrist about a year ago, said she slipped on ice, and she had a bad fall down some stairs at a client's office maybe 8 months ago. She bruised her ribs, but those were just accidents. Dr. Grant stayed quiet for a moment before asking, how many accidents has she had since you've been together? I started counting in my head, the wrist, the fall on the stairs. She had slipped getting out of the shower once and hit her shoulder on the tub. There was the time she tripped while hiking and landed hard on her side. Another time she bumped her head on a kitchen cabinet door she had left open. As I listed them one by one, I noticed Dr. Grant's expression grow more serious. Mr. Brooks, that's 6 significant injuries in less than 3 years. Have any of these resulted in insurance claims? I'm not sure, I admitted. Laura handles most of our paperwork. She's always been better with that kind of thing than I am. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not making any definitive claims, she replied carefully. But I am required to document what I've found. With your permission, I would like to request copies of your wife's medical records from her primary care physician. If there is a pattern of injuries that were never properly evaluated, that would be important to understand. That was when something clicked in my memory. Wait. Laura changed doctors about a year ago. She said her old physician in Toronto had retired and that she wanted someone new here. She sees, I can't even remember the name, someone in Burnaby, I think. Dr. Grant nodded slowly. Those records could be very helpful. Mr. Brooks, I know this is overwhelming, but if your wife is dealing with a medical condition that causes frequent injuries, bone density issues, neurological problems affecting balance, we need to identify it. And if, she hesitated slightly, there is something else going on that also needs to be addressed. Something else like what? I asked. She chose her words with care. Sometimes patterns of repeated injuries can be linked to insurance fraud. Sometimes they point to domestic violence, and sometimes there are legitimate medical explanations. I cannot assume anything, but I can say this pattern deserves further investigation. I felt as if the ground beneath me had shifted. The woman I had shared my life with for 7 years, who made me special smoothies every morning, who held my hand during my frightening symptoms, had been having accidents I barely questioned. Or was this professional in a white coat implying something far more disturbing? I want to see Laura, I said. When I entered the consultation room where Laura was sitting with the clinic manager, her face looked composed but noticeably pale. Daniel, what is going on? She asked. Why was I kept waiting so long? The clinic manager, a stern-looking woman named Susan, stood up. Mrs. Brooks, Dr. Grant has identified some concerns based on your x-rays. We need to ask you a few questions about your injury history. What followed was one of the most surreal hours of my life. Laura, appearing confused and slightly irritated, confirmed each of the incidents I had mentioned. Yes, she had slipped on ice. Yes, she had fallen down the stairs. Yes, there had been a few other minor accidents. She grew defensive when Susan pressed for more details. I'm a little clumsy. Is that a crime? Laura snapped. I don't see what any of this has to do with my tooth sensitivity. Dr. Grant, who had joined us, spoke in a calm, measured tone. Mrs. Brooks, the pattern of fractures I'm seeing suggests impacts that would normally require emergency medical care. Can you tell me which hospitals or urgent care facilities treated you for these injuries? Laura's jaw tightened. I didn't go to the hospital for most of them. They were minor. A fractured orbital socket and a skull fracture are not minor, Dr. Grant said quietly. I don't recall ever having either of those, Laura replied. The conversation quickly spiraled, with Laura beginning to accuse Dr. Grant of misreading the x-rays. She accused me of violating her privacy by discussing her medical information and insisted we leave immediately. Throughout it all, I kept watching my wife's face, trying to reconcile the woman I knew with the x-ray images I had just seen and the troubling implications Dr. Grant had carefully hinted at. We left the dental office in tense silence. In the car, Laura was visibly furious. I can't believe you let that woman interrogate me like that, she snapped. Those x-rays could show anything. Maybe I have some kind of bone condition I don't even know about. But to suggest, to imply, what exactly was she implying? I asked quietly. Laura's hands tightened in her lap. You heard her. Either that I'm lying about accidents for insurance money, or that you're somehow hurting me. Both are ridiculous. She exhaled sharply. She said there could be a medical explanation. Then I'll see a specialist, she continued quickly. But I am not going back to that dentist. She's clearly incompetent. I wanted to believe my wife. I wanted to dismiss Dr. Grant's concerns as nothing more than professional overcaution. But something inside me would not settle. That night, while Laura was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I went into her office. Laura's home office had always been her private space, a boundary I had respected without question, but I needed answers. I noticed her file cabinet was unlocked and began carefully going through the folders. Insurance paperwork, medical bills, and then I found something that made my blood run cold. Hospital discharge papers I had never seen before. 3 separate emergency room visits over the past 2 years, 1 in Vancouver and 2 in Burnaby. Each visit had been done alone. Each time she had been treated for injuries she had never mentioned to me. A dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, a concussion. According to the dates, these incidents had happened on days she told me she was attending evening client meetings or weekend seminars. Beneath those documents, I discovered insurance claims. Not from our shared policy, but from a separate personal accident insurance policy I had no idea existed. The total claims over 2 years exceeded $200,000. Every claim was linked to a different injury. Every claim had been approved and paid. I sat at her desk with the papers spread out in front of me, trying to make sense of it all. Why would Laura hide injuries from me? Why would she maintain a separate insurance policy? And then a darker thought began to creep in. Were these injuries even genuine? Or was this fraud? I heard the shower upstairs turn off. My hands trembled as I quickly took photos of the documents with my phone, then returned everything exactly as I had found it. When Laura came downstairs in her bathrobe, I was in the living room pretending to read. "Are you still upset about today?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Just processing," I replied. She sat beside me and took my hand. "Daniel, I know this all seems strange, but I promise you there's nothing sinister happening. I'm just accident-prone. I didn't tell you about some of the injuries because I didn't want you to worry, especially with your health issues." "You didn't want me to worry?" I asked. "You've already had so much on your plate," she continued gently. "The sleep problems, the stomach issues. I didn't want to add more stress." Her eyes looked sincere, concerned. The same eyes that had made me feel understood at that fundraiser 8 years ago. "I love you. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe her, but the documents I had photographed kept burning in my mind, like evidence of something I could not yet fully understand. That night, after Laura fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room and called my daughter. "Dad, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" Emily asked. I told her everything, the dental appointment, the x-rays, what I had discovered in Laura's office. She stayed silent for a long moment. "Dad, this doesn't sound right. None of it sounds right." "I know," I admitted. "Those smoothies she makes you," Emily continued slowly. "Your symptoms? When did all of that start?" I thought back carefully. "Maybe about 18 months ago. Around the time she sprained her wrist?" she asked. "Around the time the accidents started? The ones that led to insurance claims?" The implication hung between us like something toxic. "Emily, are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," she interrupted gently. "But Dad, I think you need to see a different doctor, not Dr. Parker, someone Laura doesn't know about. And I think you should stop drinking those smoothies." "You think she's poisoning me?" The words sounded absurd even as I said them aloud. "I think you've been getting progressively sicker while she's been having mysterious accidents that result in insurance payouts," Emily said quietly. "Dad, please just humor me. See another doctor, get full blood work done, and don't tell Laura." I agreed, because the fear in my daughter's voice mirrored the fear I had been trying to suppress all evening. The next morning, I poured my smoothie down the sink when Laura wasn't looking and told her I didn't feel well enough to eat. She frowned with concern, touched my forehead, and suggested I rest. Over the next 3 days, I discreetly disposed of every smoothie she made. And then something unexpected happened. My mind began to clear. The mental fog that had clouded my thoughts for months slowly started to lift. My stomach stopped cramping. I still felt weak and exhausted, but different, sharper, more aware. On the fourth day, while Laura was at what she said was a client meeting, I went to a walk-in clinic in North Vancouver, far from our usual area. I told the doctor everything, my symptoms, how long they had lasted, and my sudden improvement after stopping the smoothies. I expected skepticism, but Dr. Emily Carter listened very carefully. "Mr. Brooks, I'd like to run a comprehensive toxicology screen," she said. "If someone has been gradually introducing a harmful substance into your system, it may still appear in your blood, hair, or urine, even if you recently stopped ingesting it." She collected the samples and promised to expedite the results. "If the findings confirm what I'm concerned about, we may need to involve the police," she added. "Are you prepared for that?" Was I prepared to discover that my wife might have been poisoning me? No, but I was prepared to learn the truth. I called Emily on my way home. "I did what you said. The results should come in a few days." "Where are you going to stay until then?" she asked immediately. "Dad, if she really is—" "I'll be careful," I interrupted. "I won't eat or drink anything she gives me." "That's not enough," Emily said, her voice tight with fear. "What if she realizes you've stopped? What if she escalates?" Her fear became contagious. "I'll figure something out," I said, though in reality I had no real plan. When I got home, I found Laura in the kitchen preparing dinner. She smiled when she saw me. "How are you feeling? You look better than you have in days." "A bit better," I admitted. "Good," she said warmly. "I'm making your favorite salmon with that maple glaze you love." The table was already set, wine poured, everything looking perfectly normal. Loving. Exactly like the life I believed we had built together. I couldn't eat that dinner. I pushed the food around my plate and claimed my stomach was still unsettled. Laura's expression flickered briefly with something that looked like frustration, sympathy, before settling back into concern. "Why don't you get some rest?" she suggested gently. That night, lying in bed with Laura asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how my life had come to this. How do you look at the person you share your life with and suddenly wonder if they've been trying to kill you? My phone vibrated silently on the nightstand. A message from Emily. I called Dr. Grant's office. She filed a report with Adult Protective Services and shared the x-rays with a forensic consultant. "Dad, they believe the injury pattern is consistent with self-inflicted trauma for insurance fraud. They want to speak with you." My hands went numb. Self-inflicted. Laura had been deliberately hurting herself to collect insurance money, and if that was true, then what did it say about what she might have been doing to me? I couldn't stay in that bed any longer. I slipped out quietly and went downstairs. In the study, I began searching online for substances that could cause the symptoms I'd been experiencing. Arsenic appeared repeatedly. Thallium, antifreeze. All of them listed gastrointestinal distress, cognitive confusion, and weakness as common effects. I heard movement upstairs. Laura was awake. I closed the laptop quickly, but not before she appeared in the doorway, her figure outlined by the hallway light. "Daniel, what are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep," I replied. She stepped into the room, her silk nightgown brushing softly against her legs. "You've been acting strange since that dental appointment. Are you upset with me?" "Should I be?" I asked quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of question is that? Why didn't you tell me about the hospital visits, the emergency rooms, the injuries I knew nothing about?" She froze for the briefest moment. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. Then her expression shifted into wounded hurt. "You went through my papers. Why didn't you tell me?" I repeated. "I already explained," she said softly. "I didn't want to worry you, Daniel. You've been so fragile." "Fragile?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "I've been sick. There's a difference." "Is there?" she replied coolly. "You've been falling apart for months. Memory problems, confusion, weakness. I've been holding this household together while you deteriorate, and now you're interrogating me over a few accidents." The way she said deteriorate made my skin crawl. "What's in the smoothies, Laura?" Her face went completely blank. "Vitamins, protein powder, fruit. You've watched me make them dozens of times." What's really in them? Her expression hardened. You're losing your mind. She turned toward the door. I'm calling Dr. Parker in the morning. Maybe he can refer you to a neurologist, because this level of paranoia isn't normal. Don't walk away from me. She spun around sharply. Don't tell me what to do in my own home. Your home? I replied quietly. This was Margaret's home. For a split second, the mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flash in her eyes before it vanished, replaced by tears. How dare you, she whispered, after everything I've done for you, after putting up with your endless health complaints, your daughter's suspicion, and living in another woman's shadow. I should have known you'd never truly let me be your wife. She was convincing. If I hadn't seen the insurance claims, hadn't spoken to Dr. Grant, hadn't stopped drinking the smoothies and felt my mind begin to clear, I might have believed her. I might have apologized. Instead, I said quietly, I'm moving into the guest room until I figure some things out. Her tears stopped instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Fine, she said flatly. Maybe that's for the best. I didn't sleep at all that night. I listened to her moving around the house, heard her speaking in hushed tones on the phone, and at one point, she stayed in the kitchen for a long time. When morning came, I waited until she left for what she described as an early client breakfast. Then I called Dr. Carter. Your results are back, she said immediately. Mr. Brooks, you have elevated levels of thallium in your system, not high enough to be immediately fatal, but consistent with chronic low-dose exposure over an extended period. I've already contacted the police. They need to speak with you right away. Thallium. I searched it while still on the call. A toxic heavy metal once used in rat poison, nearly tasteless, lethal in high doses and debilitating in small, repeated amounts. The symptoms matched everything I had been experiencing. According to what I was reading, if I had continued ingesting it for a few more months, it likely would have killed me. The police arrived at my house within an hour. 2 detectives, a woman in her 40s named Detective Laura Bennett and a younger man named Detective Ryan Cole. I showed them everything, the insurance documents, the medical records I had photographed, and the emails I found on our shared computer after Laura left that morning. Emails to someone named Victor discussing the plan and keeping the old man confused. Who is Victor? Detective Bennett asked. I have no idea, I replied. I've never heard her mention that name. They collected my laptop, the documents, and samples from the supplement containers in the kitchen. Detective Cole located the blender Laura used for the smoothies and sealed it as evidence. Mr. Brooks, do you have somewhere else you can stay? Detective Bennett asked gently. If your wife has been deliberately poisoning you, it isn't safe for you to remain here when she returns. I called Emily. Within 3 hours, she had booked a flight from Calgary. Within 6 hours, I was checked into a downtown hotel with a police officer stationed outside my door. The investigation moved faster than I could have imagined. The powder inside the containers Laura used was not vitamins at all. It was contaminated with thallium sulfate. The emails revealed she had been communicating with Victor Hale, a former associate from Toronto, about insurance fraud schemes. Further investigation uncovered that Laura Whitmore wasn't even her real name. Her legal name was Laura Bennett, changed 7 years earlier just before moving to Vancouver. Before that, she had been married 3 times. All 3 husbands had died. The first 2 deaths were ruled accidental, one a fall down the stairs, another a drowning. The third husband, Victor Hale's father, had died from what was recorded as acute renal failure, and no autopsy had been conducted due to his prior kidney issues. Detective Bennett explained all of this to me in the hotel room 3 days after I left my house. Emily sat beside me, gripping my hand tightly. Victor is her stepson? I asked weakly. Former stepson, the detective clarified. He was 19 when his father died. Laura was the beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy. 3 years later, she began the pattern of self-inflicted injuries and insurance claims. Victor helped her stage the injuries, file the claims, and divide the payouts. Why target me? I asked. You were financially stable, recently widowed, and living alone, Detective Bennett replied. You owned your home outright. She also took out a life insurance policy on you without your knowledge, forged your signature. $2 million, with herself listed as the sole beneficiary. My head spun. How could she forge my signature without me realizing? She used legitimate documents you had already signed, your marriage certificate, your will, and then digitally manipulated them, Detective Bennett said grimly. Mr. Brooks, based on the thallium levels in your system and the timeline established by Dr. Carter, if you had continued drinking those smoothies for another 2 to 3 months, you likely would have died. It would have appeared to be natural causes, organ failure, possibly linked to cognitive decline. Given your age and documented health deterioration, no one would have questioned it. Emily let out a broken sound beside me. I couldn't speak at all. We arrested Laura and Victor this morning, Detective Bennett continued. She is being charged with attempted murder, fraud, identity fraud, and we are seeking to reopen investigations into the deaths of her previous husbands. Victor is being charged as an accessory. What happens now? I finally managed to ask. Now you recover, she said gently, and eventually there will be a trial. The trial began 9 months later. By then, most of my physical health had returned, though the cognitive effects lingered. I still lost words occasionally and experienced brief moments of confusion. The doctors said some of that damage might be permanent due to prolonged thallium exposure. The emotional recovery proved even more difficult. Emily moved back to Vancouver to stay close to me, taking a leave from her job in Calgary despite my protests. You spent my entire childhood taking care of me, Dad, she told me. Now let me take care of you. I attended every day of the trial. Laura looked different in the courtroom, harder, stripped of the elegant warmth she once used so effortlessly. Marcus testified against her as part of a plea deal, detailing in chilling detail how they had researched poisons, how Laura had methodically increased the thallium doses in my smoothies, and how they planned to wait just long enough after my death before accessing the insurance funds to avoid suspicion. The prosecution presented a forensic toxicologist who explained to the jury how thallium poisoning mimics natural aging and cognitive decline, and how difficult it is to detect unless specifically tested for. Dr. Grant testified about the X-rays, showing the pattern of injuries, while investigators outlined the fraudulent insurance claims, which totaled nearly $400,000 over 3 years. The defense tried to portray Laura as mentally unstable and manipulated by Victor, but it didn't convince anyone. The jury finally saw what I had been blind to all along, a calculating, methodical predator who had built a career out of exploiting vulnerable people. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and deep sorrow for the 7 years I'd lost, for ignoring my daughter's warnings, for coming so close to never knowing the truth. The judge sentenced Laura to 25 years in prison. Victor received 7. As she was led away, Laura looked back at me once. There was no remorse, only cold calculation. Outside the courthouse, Emily hugged me tightly. "It's over, Dad," she whispered. But for me, it wasn't really over. I had to learn to trust again. How to eat without fear, how to connect with people without suspicion. I sold the West Vancouver house, too full of ghosts, both real and metaphorical, and Emily and I moved to a smaller place in Kitsilano near the beach. I started therapy and slowly, painfully, began piecing my life back together. A year after the trial, I joined a support group for victims of financial fraud and relational abuse. There were 7 of us, all older adults who had been targeted by people we trusted. Hearing their stories and sharing mine helped. One woman, Patricia, 72, had her retirement savings stolen by her nephew. George had been scammed by a fake investment advisor running a Ponzi scheme. "How do you learn to trust again?" Patricia asked one evening. No one had a clear answer. Trust isn't forced. It grows slowly, carefully, with time and evidence. I'm still learning. What I try to share with others are the warning signs I missed. The isolation, how Laura subtly discouraged me from seeing old friends, positioning herself as my only support. The financial control, taking over all our accounts and paperwork. The gaslighting, making me doubt my own perceptions when I noticed symptoms. The love bombing, her attentive, caring facade, especially when I expressed suspicion. Predators like Laura target people in transition, widowed, divorced, recently retired. They seek loneliness and financial stability, and they are patient, building trust slowly, often appearing normal, even loving. I also learned that truly listening to loved ones can save your life. Emily's concerns, which I dismissed as overprotectiveness, turned out to be my warning system. If I had heeded them earlier, I could have avoided months of suffering. Now, at 64, I'm rebuilding. Some days are harder than others. I still have nightmares about the smoothies, the fog over my mind, and how close I came to not waking up. But I'm alive. I'm here. And survival itself feels like its own kind of victory. Emily is back in Calgary, thriving, but we talk every day. She still worries, probably always will, and I let her because that worry is a lifeline. If there's one lesson I want others to take from my story, it's this. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, investigate it. Don't dismiss the concerns of those who care about you. Don't let isolation or loneliness make you vulnerable to those who would exploit you. If you feel weakened, confused, or controlled, reach out for help. There's no shame, only survival. The human capacity for evil still shocks me, but the human capacity for recovery, for resilience, for finding light even in darkness is equally astonishing. Even in the darkest chapters, I'm finding my light again. If an old civil engineer can survive attempted murder and come out the other side, anyone can. That evening, the sunset over English Bay was brilliant orange and pink, spreading across the water like hope itself. I sat on the beach, grateful for every moment I almost didn't have. Surviving what was meant to end me transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. Every breath becomes a small rebellion against those who tried to silence me. I'm still here,